For those of you who know, I'm an equine activist. However, I wouldn't say that I'm in support of people riding horses. I obviously support people riding horses if they do it in ethically responsible ways where they have properly fitted tack, they're not hurting their horse, they have proper education, proper riding capabilities and training. I don't think that everyone should be riding horses because I do think that some people have heavy hands, they're abusive, they have abusive practices, methods, training, whatever. I am not only an equine activist who has shadowed veterinarians and farriers for years and have had serious, deep roots in this industry and worked with so many different people at high up levels. And on top of that, I'm a very educated vegan. I speak out about the welfare and the treatment and care of horses. And I have seen the bad treatment of horses in certain industries and the bad practices that do need to be removed. And I speak out on treating horses better so they can have a better life, a more ethical life, and they're not being consistently abused, and when you ride them they're not in pain and you're not using different types of devices that inflict pain on your animals. The whole purpose of my channel is understanding and bettering the treatment of horses. You guys are just saying, well, stop riding horses, when that's not the solution to the problem.
So what she's doing here is similar to what an animal welfarist would do when they argue that we can humanely slaughter an animal instead of just arguing for the abolishment of slaughter. These welfarist arguments always fall apart. For example, humane means to do something with compassion and benevolence. How can you humanely take the life of someone who doesn't want to die and doesn't have to die compassionately and benevolently?
I would actually say that that's really hypocritical because I actually think the complete outsider who knows nothing about the industry doesn't have the ability to speak out on something that they don't know anything about with an educated opinion.
Hi Raleigh, I'm Alicia. I'm a vegan animal rights activist, but I used to ride horses. I rode horses for 10 years. My whole life revolved around horses for a huge chunk of my life. I even went to Colorado State University majoring in equine science for 3 years. The reason I stopped after 3 years is because I went to a horse breeding internship. I witnessed cruelty there, and then something just hit me where I couldn't be part of this anymore. I completely left riding, I completely left the horse industry. I didn't want any part of it anymore because over time I couldn't deny anymore that what I was doing was not moral. I'm definitely not going to claim that I was a good rider. In fact, I was a pretty shitty rider. All I'm going to claim is that I'm not an outsider to the horse industry. So being that I'm a vegan activist who's not an outsider to it, I want to comment on what you're doing. So Raleigh has recently made videos where she responds to, quote, crazy vegans about horse riding and whether or not it's vegan. So I'm going to be responding to those responses, if that makes sense. The goal of this video is to explain why riding horses is not vegan and why a true equine activist would never promote any form of breeding and why they would not promote riding in any form. The other goal of this video is to get Raleigh to understand that she would be a lot more helpful for the animals if she was more consistent in her message and didn't contradict herself so much. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get into it.
I am vegan. I've been vegan for 4 or 5 years now. I don't know, I lost count, but for a very long time. And I have gone through my own personal struggles as being a vegan equestrian and really thoroughly understanding if it is ethical, if it is something that's humane, if it is something that I consider to be vegan, if it is hypocritical to be vegan and an equestrian. And I have found reasons why it's not and reasons why equestrians can also be vegan. And I went over it in my past 2 or 3 videos that I made on equestrians being vegan, which I will link all of those down below if anybody wants to know my take on everything so far.
So I do have sympathy for this. I mean, when I was riding horses, I absolutely loved it. I was very attached to it, like my identity was very much intertwined with it. So I can understand why someone coming up to you and telling you that doing that is morally wrong is gonna make you defensive and it's gonna make you emotionally upset. Honestly, just listening to you talk about it, to me, you just seem like you're very conflicted and possibly even confused. And I don't say that to talk down on you at all. I just see a person who is genuinely against animal cruelty, genuinely against horse abuse, but is too, emotionally and identity-wise attached to riding to let go of that in order to have your actions be more in alignment with your morals. So I do sympathize, and obviously it's amazing that you eat a plant-based diet, that you don't support the industries that cause the most animal cruelty that exists out there. Furthermore, it's amazing that you even say the word vegan at all to an audience of horse riders, because horse riders are some of the most least vegan people on this planet. So while I sympathize, I can't just let you call yourself an equine activist and try to deny the definition of veganism in order for you to feel like you can still ride horses and be vegan.
Here's the definition of veganism. Notice how it says all forms of exploitation of, as far as is possible and practicable. Riding horses is exploitation.
First of all, I have no idea how far up your asses you guys had to go to pull out that definition of veganism, but when I was looking up the definition of veganism, I could not find any definition on Google, Bing, or Yahoo search, which really tells you a lot. That's how deep I was going, that had that definition for veganism.
I am now going to demonstrate that in 60 seconds, one can find that specific definition of veganism by the Vegan Society that you're referring to on Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Something tells me that you didn't actually have any trouble finding this definition. You know, the most common used definition of veganism by literally all vegans. It could be that since it wasn't the literal first thing that came up, you thought that made it somehow hard to find. But I think it's more likely that you're just mad about this definition because this definition proves that you can't be vegan while riding horses. And why is this the most widely used definition of veganism? Well, because it comes from the Vegan Society. The Vegan Society was founded in 1944. And this definition of veganism was literally from the guy who invented the word vegan. In 1944, Donald Watson invented the word vegan to separate themselves from vegetarians who still paid for animal cruelty. Here we can see his clarification of exploitation. Since Raleigh likes to say that exploitation only has to do with money, well, according to the official definition, the clarification is that exploitation is using an animal in a way that we don't need to, or at all, really. Horse riding is under that category because it's entertainment.
In fact, veganism is almost exclusively defined as the products that you consume.
The fact that you said almost just shows that you can't even say that it is, because it's not only the products you consume. For example, vegans do not go to zoos, they don't go to aquariums, they don't go to horse races, they don't promote riding horses on their YouTube channel. They don't support making an animal's entire life revolve around entertaining us humans.
Even though, as a vegan myself, I personally agree that veganism is a lifestyle as well, but just going in to discredit these people and show how little research they actually do, this is not the actual definition of veganism. Really shows you they do their homework, you know what I mean? Matter of fact, if you want to know what the definition verbatim of veganism is, I'll read it to you. Veganism, the practice of abstaining from animal products and a philosophy that rejects—
Hold the phones. Wait a second. Raleigh, you didn't provide in your description where you got that definition from. In fact, it looks like you literally typed it on a Word document and got rid of things so that it could fit your idea of a world where vegans can ride horses. I'll even give you the benefit of the doubt that the definition by the Vegan Society is hard to find, and I'll just show you what comes up right away when you type it on Google. Veganism is the practice of abstaining from the use of animal products, particularly in diet. Notice how it doesn't say only in diet. Just because the main issue of animal cruelty and the majority of it comes from animal agriculture doesn't mean that's the only place animal cruelty can come from. That doesn't mean that's the only thing that vegans boycott. Also, the first thing that comes up comes from Wikipedia. We don't always want to trust Wikipedia for obvious reasons. However, you can see even here at the bottom, it says term coined by Donald Watson. So if you don't want to trust Wikipedia and you want to dig deeper, you can look up who that is and you can see that he made this definition, he made the word, and he made the definition into the Vegan Society. So the definition that you paraphrased is still coming from the Vegan Society. I'm sorry to break it to you. I know you love riding horses, but riding horses is not vegan. It falls under the category of exploiting animals for entertainment and for hobby.
Horses is exploitation. You're exploiting someone else's body to entertain yourself. And that is the only reason why anyone rides horses.
That's actually not true all across the board. Sure, the majority of the time are people riding for selfish reasons. Yeah, absolutely. Do people need to ride horses? No, they don't. But again, I love that they're not even addressing any of the scientific information that I laid out in my original video, which I will link below, where I literally talk about actual facts on how riding is not abusive, it does not hurt horses if you do it in the correct way. You use the correct tack, you are properly trained and have good EQ, and you also are within the weight limits.
But even if you check off that entire list, which most writers are not going to, most of the people watching your YouTube channel do not check off that entire list. Not all riders can afford horse riding lessons, which are absolutely necessary for proper equitation. Not all horse riders are even going to know if their tack is not fitting properly. But that's besides the point. Even if, like I said, everything on your list is being checked off, the kind of riding you're promoting or any riding at all could cause injury to the horse and the rider. You promote horse jumping. You have videos of yourself on your channel riding cross-country jumps. When a horse is slamming down landing from a jump with the weight of a rider, it's very hard on their deep digital flexor tendon. That's a tendon that runs behind their pastern joint. It's kind of like the ankle of a horse. It's always being stressed and stretched from the weight. Injury to this is so common. You're also slamming down on the coffin bone, that little tiny bone that's inside of a hoof. Any horse person knows that if something happens to that bone, a horse is fucked. The suspensory ligament can also tear easily because that's the ligament that helps them snap back into place when the weight is taken off. And the swelling of joints is super common in horses that are ridden. Not only do so many riders continue to ride their horses even if they're limping, but even if they're not limping, if something's going on inside of that hoof, you can't see it, there's a hoof in the way. Most riders are not going to have the veterinary knowledge to see when there is an injury, and they're just going to keep riding until one day the limping is too much and it's interfering with their show schedule. Then they call the vet, and then the vet says, hey, yeah, time to put the horse down. It's too late. And it doesn't even have to just be from jumping. How many times in horse racing do we see cannon bones snapping in half from the stress of running so hard? How many times do we see injuries occur from just a misstep, a dislocated hip? Riding horses exponentially increases the risk of injuring horses. So why, as a supposed equine activist, are you still promoting riding? Horse people know that leg injuries in general for horses, it's not like you can just put a cast on and call it a day and it heals. Leg injuries are usually a death sentence. Usually they have to be put down because it costs thousands and thousands of dollars that people aren't willing to pay to fix these things, and people just don't think it's worth it. They'd rather just go get a new horse. I know that you're going to say, oh, well, horses injure themselves all the time being left alone in a pasture, but that doesn't give you the right to then add on to their risk of injury by going on and riding them on top of that risk of them in the field hurting themselves. Why would you want to increase the risk that's already there?
Very logical, normal people who don't shove their beliefs down other people's throats, which is something that I absolutely hate. I think it's fine to educate people, but it's different in educating and forcing your beliefs on others, you know?
When you say that, you sound like either a non-vegan or a vegan apologist, but you claim to be a vegan equine activist, so it's kind of weird to hear you say something like that. Do you think you're, quote, forcing your views when you share about horse abuse and you promote the end of horse abuse? I don't think you would. So why is any other type of vegan activism, quote, forcing views? Let's take two scenarios and see if we can decide which one is more forceful. A vegan activist yelling in a megaphone to stop hurting animals, or somebody strapping a saddle to a horse's back and getting on them and forcing them to go wherever they want and do whatever they want.
However, I think it is really terrible to exclude all equestrians from being vegan as if veganism is like this exclusive club of people, which I just think is so stupid and ridiculous.
It's not an exclusive club of people, but you do have to live a certain way in order to be called a vegan, in order to call yourself a vegan. I mean, would you also think that it's not fair to say meat eaters can't be vegan, to say that they can't be in our, quote, club? No, you wouldn't. So why is it different for you for the exploitation you're doing?
In order to give a horse the same type of life that they would have in the wild, you have to exercise them. There's no such thing as a big enough pasture, unless you are someone who literally owns like thousands of acres of land and you're just letting your horses run free. That's the only close equivalent. Most people don't have stuff like that for the already pre-existing horses we have in captivity today that can't be re-relinquished. So the only alternative is to understand how to not cause your horse pain through properly fitted tack, EQ, riding, whatever the fuck, and proper vet care, giving those horses the best life possible in captivity, and exercising them.
Really? The only way for a horse to get exercise is for people to ride them? There's no such thing as shaking a can of grain out in a field and having them run around to get exercise that way? You know what? I'm just gonna play clips of herself, her younger self, to directly contradict what she's saying. I'm just gonna let her do the talking.
Many studies have shown that you can exercise a horse just in a round pen alone. I mean, there's a lot of ways to exercise your horse from the ground. This is just an excuse to get on and ride. I don't think that horses need to be ridden. I don't think that a lot of people should ride horses because a lot of people do it for their own benefit and for their own good. But I'm not going to sit here and say that you should never ride a horse and that riding a horse in general is bad. I do think that the exploitation of a horse in the sense that you're going to just ride them when you want to train them to go over jumps and then take them to shows and you never do anything else with them, I do think that's exploiting your animal. But because there's so many studies that prove that even if you do have a fitting saddle, it still does a lot of damage to your horse's back. That's just statistics, okay? You have to get really nice high quality saddle pads and girths to be able to ride a horse successfully without causing them pain, but it'll still probably cause them a little bit of pain. That's why I tell people don't ride your horse multiple times a week. I do think that probably 90% of riders out there ride horses specifically for their own benefit. They know that the horse actually doesn't want to be ridden. They know that the horse doesn't want a dead cow strapped to their back and some 180-pound person to jump on them and tell them which way to go and what to do. They know that. And one thing I want to say is that I always tell people it's bad to ride your horse every single day. It's actually really detrimental to their skeletal system, which we'll get into later in this video. But what I say is I at most ride my horse twice a week, if that. I mean, most of the time I try to stick to riding him once a week just to keep up with his training and everything like that. But I don't ride my horse for my own personal gain or benefit. Cross-country jumping, I swear to God, you could take my horse out, take his halter off, and this horse would literally run the whole course, including the jumps. I mean, seriously, my horse loves it that much. Now, does that mean that he necessarily likes me riding him over the jumps? Probably not necessarily, because I'm the one who's kind of sitting up there controlling him. So I understand that side of the argument. I understand that you don't have to ride horses, nor should you in reality, but
easily achieved without someone atop them by walking the horse from the ground.
Okay, one thing I want to say to that, riding actually does not provide a horse with an enriched environment. I think that that argument is bullshit, and I think that everyone in the equine world knows that that's bullshit. You can't ride a horse and give your horse an enriching and fulfilling life. That's not possible, because horses in general probably don't want to be ridden if they could actually talk to be ridden. But guess what? Horses are still ridden. Yeah, that doesn't mean they don't have a spinal problem. What the fuck, dude? You're going... What the fuck? I have one more point, and that is, she has no points. What is she talking about? I have one more point, and that is if you left the girth and tack on 24/7, then yes, there would be problems. No, there are studies that show that even riding your horse for more than 30 minutes at a time is detrimental to their health. I mean, there are literal studies that show that. They show the damage that the weight on a horse's back can do for longer than 30-minute periods. They even show that after about 15 minutes of riding, horses start showing signs that they're actually uncomfortable, like physically uncomfortable. But for a 1 to 2 hour ride, it shouldn't affect the horse at all. It does. Oh my god, idiot. Horseback riding is just too large. You can't interview 5 people and pretend you know enough to classify riding as cruel or abuse. Yes, you fucking can. You can go to any boarding stable out there and you can see the abuse that goes on. I mean, literally the horse world is so fucking just, oh my god, like we are not evolving with the rest of the world for some reason. People still fucking think that it is 100% a-okay to hit your horse, to put a piece of metal in their mouth, to jab your horse in the ribs with spurs, to fucking abuse the shit out of your horse just in everyday riding. And people still think that's okay. Why are we not evolving with the rest of the world? Why is this shit still okay in this day and age? I don't get it. And I am an equestrian.
As you can see in Raleigh's recent videos where she's addressing, quote, crazy vegans, she says that she literally only rides for her horse's best interest and that people should ride horses just so that they have exercise. But she's fully aware of how harmful riding is to horses, and she's fully aware that they can be exercised without being ridden. So I'm just like over here scratching my head, baffled at why she's still promoting riding. Especially when she knows that her audience is not going to follow every checklist of what she says on how to not be cruel, and they're just going to do their own thing. She talks about how she's an equine behavior expert, she looks at body language, she knows, what pinning of the ear means and stuff like that. She says her riding's consensual because she only does things that the horse, quote, wants to do. But she fails to realize that she could interpret these body language cues wrongly, and her audience of people who aren't as much of experts as her are definitely likely to interpret body language wrongly. You're giving them this gray area where they are going to interpret these things, and when they go on and try it on their own, they're just going to end up being abusive and doing the things that you're against. So why not just stop promoting riding at all?
It's not right to breed horses so that way you can ride them. Then why are we breeding horses?
I don't see how that was confusing. People are breeding horses in order to ride them. That's probably wrong.
That's not true. A lot of horses are bred for non-riding purposes. So I think that that's also another hilarious thing she's saying. It just, again, goes to show that she doesn't know anything about the industry at all. And on top of that, I don't know if I was really clear or not, but I don't stand by breeding horses. I don't believe in breeding horses or any animal for that matter. I think that it should be left up to the professionals, and I don't think people should be breeding horses if you don't know what you're doing, if you're just doing it irresponsibly for no fucking reason because you have a horse that you're like, oh, let me find this random ass dude on Craigslist who has $1,000 stud fee for some shitty horse and let me just breed it to my mare. And to clarify, all of my animals are adopted, and they've all been adopted my whole life.
You don't support breeding horses, but you think breeding horses should be left up to the professionals. Is that not a blatantly obvious contradiction? Let me tell you a little bit about my internship with professionals. Yeah, BMQ horses, they would be considered by the industry to be professional breeders of Western pleasure horses. But what they were doing is leading mares on halter and lead, holding them down, leading the stallion in, and whether that mare liked it or not, forcing her to be bred by that stud. They would knock her on her forehead to distract her. She would grunt, she would make noises, she wouldn't like it, and they would do it anyway, because they had money to make. They only had one stud for a farm of 100 horses, and they were breeding daughters to their own father. Normally we would think that's sick, but hey, since it produces offspring that have good movement, anything flies, right? Out of about 25 births that I helped with on that farm, about 5 of them resulted in either the mother and baby dying or the baby dying. And that's all unnecessary death and suffering for the literal purpose of selling horses so that people can ride them. These, quote, professionals were also using abusive training practices, like the methods of Clinton Anderson, who you speak against, rightfully so. The way they would train yearlings to pick up their feet is they would tie their feet around their fetlock and around their girth area and literally just force them to stand there like that and panic until they got used to it. A lot of the births were dystocia. They were difficult, like a mare prolapsed while giving birth and had to be shot in the head. A foal came out face first instead of feet first, so we had to saw off that foal's head. They were already dead, but we had to saw off the head and have a veterinarian dig his arm in there and get the rest of the body out. We barely saved that mare's life. All of that just so people could make money for people who want to ride horses that will pay them. And if you're not against all breeding, you're supporting places like that, because places can so easily look all shiny and professional on the outside and operate exactly like that or even worse. Also, for every horse that's brought into existence, you're taking away an already existing horse's ability to have a place where they can be taken care of and live. So supporting breeding of any kind is in such direct contradiction to your claim of being an equine activist. It's the same logic as adopt, don't shop. It would be like a activist for cats and dogs saying that we could leave breeding up to the professionals, when in all reality the professionals creating dogs are the reason there's so many strays being euthanized, there's so many dogs on the streets. The quote professional breeders are the reason we have all these fucked up breeds and health problems happening.
You know, again, going back to the breeding, I don't believe that people should breed horses, but I mean, even still, horses are still around. We still have like millions of horses that are domesticated and in captivity in the US alone. So yeah, I mean, even if you adopt horses though, nobody is going to have a horse if they're not going to ride them. There's very few people who would own a horse at no benefit to themselves, which is what I was trying to say by that. Even adopting horses, this has nothing to do with breeding or adopting. Nobody is going to keep a horse, or very few people are going to keep horses at no benefit to themselves. And that was the point of what I was saying.
The issue of unwanted horses has everything to do with breeding. Why do you keep saying you don't support breeding, but also saying you're okay with professional breeding? It just doesn't make sense. Yes, there's millions of horses that exist right now, but that's why we need to promote the most vegan solution that we can have for the benefit and well-being of those horses, which includes not riding them. It includes supporting horse sanctuaries, vegan horse sanctuaries that don't exploit and ride their horses. If you stop promoting riding on your channel and you stop promoting breeding, you could instead promote veganism, like actual veganism without contradictions. And according to Oxford University, we can have 75% less land used on a vegan diet, which means that 75% of land could be used for rewilding. We could have more land for horses to actually be wild, and for sanctuaries for all of these unwanted horses as the world progressed toward veganism. So why on earth are you promoting the very cause of the problem, which is breeding, instead of the solutions at hand, which are sanctuaries and veganism? You're right. Riders have this mindset. They're selfish. They're doing it for their ego. They wouldn't keep a horse if the horse wasn't benefiting them. So why are you perpetuating this mindset to continue? Why not advocate for people to stop seeing horses this way, to stop seeing them as things for them to ride, to stop calling them it, to stop seeing them as objects? Why not promote them as individuals who have value, whether they're trained or not? Why not promote the safety and well-being of horses and looking after them in a way that is for their best interest, not the riders?
What? No, I don't agree with breeding horses. I don't know where she got this idea that, like, I agree with breeding horses. I am 100% an advocate for adopting. I literally had clothing that said adopt, don't shop. All of my animals are adopted.
She got the idea because instead of saying I'm against all breeding no matter what, you said, I don't promote breeding, I think we should leave it up to the professionals, which means you're okay with the professionals breeding horses, which means you are okay with people breeding horses. All you would have to do to be consistent with your message is to say, hey, look, I'm against all breeding, including professional breeding. I speculate, and I could totally be wrong, but I speculate that the reason you don't say this is because you would piss off a lot of people and lose subscribers.
So then what's your solution? Like, what is your solution? That all horses should just be dumped? That nobody should own horses because the cost isn't justified? Like, what are you talking about? What is your argument?
The solution is vegan animal sanctuaries. The solution is doing whatever we can to promote a vegan world so that we can have the lands back, like I mentioned earlier, for more animal sanctuaries and for more wild animals to thrive once again. The solution is for current people who have horses to stop riding them and to start caring for them in a way that is for their best interest, to stop seeing them with this mindset of just using them, to stop all breeding of horses and stop promoting any kind of breeding of horses, and to stop promoting horse riding for obvious reasons I've already mentioned, but also just because promoting that lifestyle is promoting people who are going to do things that you're against, such as use bits, use whips, abuse animals, hit animals, and breed animals. I know that you promote a very specific, as non-abusive as possible type of riding, but everyone in your comments, I go through them, they're just regular horse riders. A lot of them use bits, a lot of them do competitions, a lot of them do a lot more hardcore riding than you promote. So it's like, you're promoting this certain type of thing, but when you're not consistent on your message, you're giving a message that what you're doing is just because it's your opinion and what you prefer, and that everyone else can just do what is of their opinion and what they prefer. So people are watching your channel like, oh, that's cool that she doesn't use bits, but I'm going to use bits, because you're not consistent with your message. You're just saying, like, this is how I do it and this is how I recommend doing it. If you were more consistent with your message and you were to say, like, horse riding is wrong, why do we see these animals as objects for us to exploit, then you wouldn't be having this following of people who are committing the very thing that you're against, which is horse abuse. And the other part of the solution, since I got on a side tangent just now, is building up funding and support for vegan horse sanctuaries so that the people who cannot get rid of their mindset that horses are objects to exploit for their own ego can surrender their horse to a sanctuary and give their horse to people who will care for them in a way that is not just exploiting them for their own ego. Of course, we can't force people to do this, but we can push for legislation that bans horse riding and horse abuse and actually penalizes people for committing horse abuse. We can educate them. Just because something's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't try, and we certainly shouldn't keep perpetuating the abuse. We should at least try to not promote it and stop it. Somebody like you can be a very powerful voice to bridge the gap and, be on the same level with equestrians and teach them that they don't have to keep doing this abuse and that they can give their horse a sanctuary life for the rest of their life.
Maybe it's better for horses to be wild, just like it's better to take public transit.
What? What are you talking about? We already have the responsibility of taking care of all the horses that have been domesticated. You cannot just turn horses back out into the wild. You don't know what you're talking about. It's ridiculous that you even made a video reacting to me. I'm so mad right now because if you're seriously gonna sit there and advocate for every single human being to just dump their horses back into the wild, first of all, that's illegal and nobody can do that. But second of all, you're asking for all those horses to have a death sentence. You know why? Because the BLM doesn't even want the 33,000 horses that we do have left in the wild to be in the wild. And they're rounding them up by the thousands every single month and sending them across borders to be slaughtered and killed. So if that's really your solution, then you're asking for all horses to be killed.
You're absolutely right. People who have horses currently, a vast majority of cases, they cannot just let their horses out into the wild. It's not a realistic thing to ask of somebody. If they're domesticated, it's just a bad thing. So you're right about that. Now in the future, when the world is more vegan and we have extra land that's rewilded, could we set domesticated horses free on those lands? Maybe. Obviously, that's not available to us right now. So the solution is to stop promoting this horse industry culture so that people stop breeding horses into existence and getting into riding, because that right there is why this is a problem, period. That, and of course, a non-vegan world where humans have taken over, like, the whole land that used to be wild, of course.
somewhere, you kind of almost fell off after that second jump, which, you know, fine. She's probably very new to jumping, and that's awesome. I mean, Oh. The riding instructor. Equestrians are probably the toughest women in any sport because from such a young age, equestrians are so used to being in so much pain. Like, falling off a horse hurts, even if it's just something small like that. I can remember even when I was just a little kid, how many wrecks and falls I'd had. It's just kind of funny because equestrians put themselves through so much physical trauma at such a young age.
Really quick, I just want to say the riders are consenting to this. They're doing this out of their own free will. The horses are not. The horses are not consenting to being at risk for injury. The horses are not doing these things out of their own free will. So, you know, you can say, oh, how cute, riders, haha, they love to just get hurt. But there are ways for you to get hurt that don't involve also hurting animals. Stop involving animals in your need for speed and adrenaline.
Oh my god, are you okay? It happens. Everyone has days where their horse doesn't want to jump. I mean, where their horse refuses a jump, or if they accidentally set their horse up wrong for the jump. I mean, that shit just happens. It's just part of riding, you know? That's one of the reasons why equestrians are just so fucking tough, because they're just so... I mean, the fact that you're willing to fall off of just this massive animal going really fast and being super injured, and then you're willing to get back up and do it again. Equestrians are crazy. I mean, there's a reason why that stereotype exists, and it's because you have to be insane to do what we do and be willing to, like, put yourself in physical harm every day. It's just crazy. I don't even know why I ride. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing?
It's interesting that you're well aware that horses don't want to jump, but you have to correct yourself and be like, oh, well, maybe it was because the rider set them up wrong. I mean, yeah, that's a thing, but that doesn't explain all the times that horses refuse jumps without being set up wrong. And here you are again glorifying the horse rider as some tough, like, super cool, like, ooh, you're so tough person. The horses are not consenting to any of this. Go do another sport to get your toughness going or whatever, but don't involve animals. Do you see how you're promoting this horse culture instead of being consistent in your message against horse abuse?
That was really good. I'm so glad.
Again, you're promoting this problematic culture. You're promoting riding. You're promoting having a horse do something that they don't want to do. How are you going to tell me that something like jumping, and those jumps in that video weren't even very small, like, how are you going to tell me that that's for the horse's best interest? That little girl riding probably got that horse from a breeder. They probably are not using vegan tack like you do. Like, you're promoting things that you're against. It's maddening.
And I don't have a problem with people swimming with horses, but when it comes to swimming with horses, especially in deep water, which is what we're talking about in this video, because these horses literally went completely underwater, there's a lot of steps and precautions that you have to take as an equestrian to ensure the safety of you and your animal. It is not uncommon for people to die, experienced people to die riding their horses in water that is deep enough where the horse is actually swimming. There's tons of precautions you have to take. This includes the type of tack you're using, which it's preferred that anytime you take your horse in water that they're actually swimming in, you're tackless. Now, do I think that swimming with a horse is abusive? Obviously not. I think it's totally fine. I think as long as you're following the right steps, because it is easy for horses to drown in.
It's just a common repetitive theme with Raleigh where she admits that something is painful and harmful to a horse, but also says she's not against it and that there's a right way to do it. When you have this kind of contradictory, inconsistent message, a 12-year-old girl is going to see this and be like, oh, Raleigh's okay with swimming with horses. And then she's going to go ahead and do it in the way that you don't promote and hurt the horse or herself. So it's just like, why don't you just promote not doing these things.
It's all about working with the horse and taking time with the horse. It's not about pushing the horse or beating them anymore, not like the old Western ways. And I think that people need to realize that the equine world, although slowly, we are evolving and we are coming around, and eventually not all of us will be abusive assholes, okay?
So in this clip, she talks about how she's against horse racing, against rodeo, and against the term breaking a horse. She prefers the term starting a horse and doing it in more gentle ways. I mean, I would argue that that's probably just a euphemism to make you feel better about what you're doing. But the thing is, you say you're against rodeo, but barrel racing is part of rodeo, and you're inconsistent on whether or not you're against barrel racing, and you have people that watch you that barrel race. So you're clearly not providing a clear and consistent message. You have an audience of people who are still doing things that you're against. And, you know, you could say, oh, I have an audience of people who are not vegan, so they're still doing things I'm against. But the thing is, I'm not here making them feel good about it. You're over there making people feel good about what they're doing in the horse industry, even though you're against it, by making these videos against vegan about how riding isn't cruel. So people are going to go ride and they're not going to follow your checklist of things that you say need to happen in order for it to not be cruel. But they're going to feel good about doing it because you made a video against an angry, crazy vegan.
If you haven't seen my crazy vegan versus equestrian video, go watch it. I am also vegan, so for any vegans who are clicking on this video, you should probably know that I'm also a vegan and an equestrian. That's a thing. Thank you, Ren. Thank you so much for making equestrians look like abusive pieces of shit like what you are. Equestrians are not like Ren. Ren is one of the worst and most abusive equestrians I have literally ever read about.
So you're contradicting yourself again here, because as earlier in my video, there's clips of you saying how rampant horse abuse is within the horse industry and how common, and how you could go to any boarding stable and see it. So for you to say that and then now say that not all of us are like this or most of us aren't like this is just a contradiction once again. So for context, Ren Hurst used to be an animal abuser, horse person who used to like beat horses and stuff. And she had a realization that she was doing something wrong and she stopped. And now she has committed her life to caring for horses without exploiting them, and she's written books about it. It's pretty similar to my story, although she might have been worse than me. I haven't read the book myself, but from Raleigh's video that I watched, it sounds like she was worse than me. But the point is, she's doing the right thing now. So even if she grew up abusing horses, she's not doing that now, and she's promoting the opposite of it. She's actually promoting not riding at all, which is more than you can say, Raleigh, and that's why I think you're offended by this. Your whole video about this book is talking about how abusive she was, and condemning her as a whole person because of that. So, like, can people not have pasts? Can people not do something wrong and then change and advocate against what they used to do wrong? That's what I did. I used to be a straight-up horse abuser. I woke up and realized it was wrong, and I now speak out against it, and I'm now a vegan animal rights activist. Someone who inspired me to feel like I can be an activist with the past that I have is Joey Carbstrong. He used to be a violent gang member committing violence against people, and now he's a vegan animal rights activist. And he made me feel like, you know, just because you have a past, that doesn't mean you can't do the right thing and advocate for the right thing moving forward. Now, do I agree with everything Ren Hurst is, like, doing now? I don't know enough about her to say whether I do or not, but the point is, all you did was analyze her past as an abuser in order to condemn what she's doing now. Why didn't you analyze what she's actually promoting now? So in conclusion, while I acknowledge that it's really amazing that you're a voice within the horse community, speaking out against things like bits, whips, spurs, horse racing, and rodeo, it's not enough to be able to call yourself a vegan, and it's not enough to be able to call yourself an equine activist. And it's not enough for you to be able to sell shirts that say no excuse for animal abuse, which is a vegan activist term. It's dishonest of you to make so many contradictions and to sell shirts with vegan sayings on them when you're not acting in alignment with those sayings. Because you're not saying that you're against breeding and that you're against riding, you're promoting breeding and riding, which means you're promoting the problem of unwanted horses and having too many horses and the BLM slaughtering horses. The fact that you're making angry rampage videos responding to vegans is making the entire horse community feel good about their choice to ride horses and probably do things that you're against, because let's face reality. Your audience and the horse people in general are not following your checklist of using vegan tack, not using bits, not using whips, only riding for 30 minutes, etc., etc. They're just not doing that. But you're making them feel good about what they are doing because your message is inconsistent. You would help so many more horses, so many more animals if you were to just give up riding. Just give it up. I promise you can find other hobbies. You can find more fulfillment. You can spend your time doing more activism for horses that's actually effective and doesn't promote a confusing message where people are just going to, think that you're just saying an opinion and do their own thing anyway. We need somebody exactly like you in the vegan movement. Think of all the good you can do with your already large platform if you were to promote veganism, true veganism, and give up the contradictions. Think how much better you would sleep at night knowing that you don't have to think to yourself, is horse riding vegan or not, and feel like that conflict within yourself. A true vegan and a true equine activist would not support any breeding of any kind. They would support horse sanctuaries. They would try to get horse people to stop riding. They would encourage people to look after their horses without exploiting them. They would encourage people who can't manage that to give their horses up to sanctuaries. They would promote veganism so that we could have a more vegan world, which would free up more land for horses and for animal sanctuaries. Okay, I officially rest my case. And me, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to do whatever I can. I don't have as big of a platform yet, but I'm going to try to use my past and my knowledge about horses to try and bridge this gap, because let's face it, horse people, like I said earlier, are some of the most not vegan people in this world. I know veganism is not a spectrum, but let's face it, horse riders, they're more likely to be in support of dairy farming, cattle ranching, fishing, hunting. That's the kind of people horse people are. So Raleigh, I feel like you don't even fit in with this group of people that you're making content for. Just accept the truth of who you are and be a vegan animal rights activist. That's what I had to do. And of course, this was never a hate video. This is never just me talking shit. So hopefully, it is not taken as such. Anyway, I hope you all have a beautiful day. Share this with anyone who thinks that riding horses is vegan. Maybe even share this with non-vegans who ride horses to get them to think about things a little bit. And if you are not eating a vegan diet yet, you're not vegan yet, definitely listen to the TEDx talk, Every Argument Against Veganism. Watch the documentary Dominion, free on YouTube. Raleigh, imagine if you promoted these kinds of things. Okay. Anyway, have a good day. Bye. Oh, also, before you go, if you liked this video, I have a podcast called the Stop the Violence Podcast. It's on this YouTube channel, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and it'll be linked and everything. So definitely support me on that.